Okay, let's talk about something that I'm willing to bet pretty much all of us do, but very few of us actually understand. We're going to dive into the strange science behind doom scrolling.
You know that feeling, right? It's late, you know you should be asleep, but there you are, phone in hand, just endlessly scrolling through one piece of bad news after another. You can feel it making you anxious and upset, but for some reason you just can't stop. What is going on there?
Well, there's a name for it. Doom scrolling. Sometimes people call it doom surfing. The term really blew up around 2020, for obvious reasons with the pandemic, but it perfectly captures this weird, compulsive habit of consuming bad news even though we know it's bad for us.
So, first things first, let's get a sense of the scale here. Is this just a thing a few of us do, or is it a massive, widespread problem? Well, the numbers, they're pretty eye-opening. A survey from this year found that nearly a third of all adults in the US are regular doom scrollers. But this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the generational breakdown. For millennials, it's almost half, at 46%. And for Gen Z, it's a staggering 51%, over half. The generations that grew up as digital natives are the ones most caught in this digital trap. And that really gets to the core paradox of this whole thing, doesn't it? Bad news makes us feel anxious. To deal with that anxiety, we seek more information, hoping to feel more in control. But all we find is more bad news, which just cranks up our anxiety even more. It's a feedback loop from hell. So what's actually driving it?
To figure that out, we've got to look at two things. First, let's look at the external culprits, the actual design of the digital world we live in, which is, and this is key, built to do exactly this.
And let's meet accomplice number 1, the infinite scroll. Think about it. Back in the day, you'd get to the bottom of a web page and have to click Next Page. That click, as small as it was a decision point. It was a moment to pause. Infinite scroll completely removes that. The bottom of the page never comes. The content just keeps flowing, pulling you down the rabbit hole. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The guy who invented infinite scroll, Asa Raskin, said this himself. He later said he regretted it because it was intentionally designed not to help you, but to keep you hooked. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Now this tech is so powerful because it hacks these really old, deep-seated parts of our psychology. For one, we have a negativity bias. It's an evolutionary thing. Our ancestors who paid more attention to the rustling in the bushes were more likely to survive than the ones admiring the sunset. Then you mix in a modern fear of missing out, FOMO, and this desperate need to feel in control when things feel chaotic. You put all that together, it's a perfect storm. And, this idea isn't even entirely new. Way back in the 1970s, researchers were talking about something called mean world syndrome. They saw that people who watched a ton of TV news started to believe the world was a much scarier, more violent place than it actually was. Doom scrolling is basically mean world syndrome on steroids delivered by an algorithm 24/7 right into the palm of your hand. Okay, so the technology is basically designed to get us hooked, but that's only half the story. The real plot twist, the part that's just wild, is what happens inside our own brains. This is an inside job. And here is the single most important scientific finding in all of this. When you get stressed out, like say from reading a bunch of bad news, your brain doesn't just feel bad. It fundamentally changes its own operating system. So check this out. Researchers found that when we're calm, our brains have what's called an optimism bias. We tend to pay more attention to good news and kind of shrug off the bad news. But the moment you introduce stress, that bias completely evaporates. Your brain flips a switch into threat vigilance mode, and it actually becomes better at processing negative information. It starts looking for it. So what's going on in there? Well, think of it like a power struggle in your head. Stress weakens your prefrontal cortex. That's the sophisticated, rational part of your brain, the thinker, that handles logic and self-control. At the very same time, it boosts your amygdala. That's the primitive, emotional part, the reactor, that's screaming, danger, danger. So the part of you that says, hey, maybe we should put the phone down gets quieter, while the alarm bells get louder. And if you stay in that cycle long enough, it can lead to this really tough psychological state called learned helplessness. Basically, after being bombarded with so much bad news about things you can't control, your brain can just kind of give up. It starts to believe that nothing you do matters, which makes it even harder to break the cycle. So, let's just put it all together, right? You see some bad news. That causes stress. That stress literally rewires your brain on the fly, weakening your self-control and making you hyper-focused on finding more threats. You are now biologically primed to keep scrolling. It's a perfect, vicious trap. Okay, so that's the trap. It's part technology, part psychology. Now for the most important question. How do we get out of it? How do we rewrite this ending? Well, it seems like people are reacting in two totally opposite ways. On one side, you have us, the doom scrollers, the compulsively over-informed. But on the other extreme, you have a huge and growing group of people who are doing the exact opposite, total news avoidance. They're just tuning it all out because it's too much. And this isn't a small fringe group. The number of people who say they actively avoid the news jumped to 38% in 2022. Both of these behaviors, doom scrolling and news avoidance, are really just two symptoms of the same core problem. Our information environment just feels toxic. But there has to be a middle ground, right?
There is. It all comes down to taking back control. So here are a few concrete steps. 1. Set hard time limits. Maybe it's 10 minutes in the morning, 10 at night. That's it. 2. Make a conscious effort to diversify where you get your news. Don't just let the algorithm feed you. 3. Switch from passive scrolling to active consuming. Ask yourself, okay, is this actually useful to me? Can I do anything with this information? 4. Actively look for what's called solutions journalism. Stories that aren't just about the problems, but about the responses to those problems. And finally, number 5. Take a real digital detox every once in a while. Just unplug completely for a day. Let your brain reset.
Ultimately, in this age of infinite information and endless feeds, our attention has become the prize. And I think understanding how these external forces and our own internal wiring work together to capture it is the first, most crucial step to deciding for yourself where that attention goes. Thanks for tuning in.